So on May 11th of this year, you might have, gone to the grocery store, looked at the price of basic produce, and realized you were suddenly paying double.
Right.
Or maybe you noticed the cost of filling up your car had jumped so dramatically, it felt like a glitch at the pump.
Yeah, a lot of people were feeling that exact same shock.
And I mean, it is incredibly easy to look at those price hikes as just another frustrating wave of inflation. But today, we are going to trace that exact squeeze on your wallet directly back to a 12-hour window in late February.
A very specific 12-hour window.
Exactly. A window where 900 coordinated strikes fundamentally broke the geopolitical architecture of the Middle East.
We are looking at a localized military action that instantly cascaded into a global economic and humanitarian shockwave. And it is a sequence of events that is still actively unfolding around us right now in late May 2026.
Welcome to today's deep dive. We are stepping back from the chaotic minute-by-minute news churn to look squarely at a situation that is current, lethal, and ongoing, the 2026 U.S.-Iran war.
Right. And our mission today is to clearly lay out the architecture of how we arrived at this exact moment without any of the sensationalism or spin you might find on network television.
To do this, we're relying on a highly detailed source stack that you, our listener, provided. We have a historical dossier synthesizing declassified records and vetted press on the Iranian nuclear program.
Which is foundational context for all of this.
It really is. But, crucially, you also brought us something incredibly valuable. You brought your own open brain data points recorded just weeks ago on May 11th, which capture the real-time economic metrics and public opinion toll as you were actually experiencing them.
But before we dive into those metrics, we really need to make something explicitly clear to you, the listener. Because this conflict is literally happening right now. The historical verdict is nowhere near written.
Not even close.
Right. The justification for this war, its strict legality under international law, and the intelligence bases behind it, all of these things are actively, fiercely contested. We are not here to take a political side.
Absolutely not.
We are not endorsing the viewpoints of the military planners, the politicians, or the protesters in the streets. We are simply acting as your guides to unpack the mechanisms of these events, reporting the timeline precisely as it appears in the sources you brought to us.
Okay, let's unpack this, because to understand where we are today, we really have to look at the sheer scale of what happened on February 28th, 2026.
A catalyst.
Right. The dossier outlines years of failed nuclear renegotiations and an Iranian nuclear program that was advancing at a rapid pace. So tensions were simmering for a long time.
Decades, really.
Yeah, but I'm looking at the data for the specific catalyst, what was dubbed Operation Epic Fury, and the numbers are they're difficult to process. Can you walk us through exactly what the U.S. and Israel executed on that day?
Yeah, the defining characteristic of Operation Epic Fury was its absolute saturation of the battle space. I mean, the U.S. and Israel launched roughly 900 strikes in about 12 hours.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, just to put the mechanics of that into perspective, 12 hours is essentially a single evening into the following morning.
So just overnight.
Right, overnight. Executing 900 strikes means landing more than one strike every single minute, continuously, across a sovereign nation's territory.
We hear the phrase surgical strikes so often in modern military briefings. The implication is usually, a drone taking out a single vehicle on an isolated road or something.
Exactly, highly targeted.
But a strike a minute across an entire nation's infrastructure, it's not a scalpel. That is a synchronized earthquake.
No, it wasn't surgical at all. It was a systemic dismantling. The military targets were comprehensive.
What were they actually hitting?
Well, the strike systematically hit Iranian ballistic missile silos, they dismantled their layered air defense networks, and they targeted widespread conventional military infrastructure.
Okay.
But the most consequential strikes weren't aimed at radar dishes or concrete bunkers. They were aimed at the leadership. In that opening wave on February 28th, Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei was killed.
Wow.
Yeah, along with a significant tier of senior military commanders.
I want to pause on that because killing the Supreme Leader obviously sounds major, but I don't think people realize how fundamentally different that is from, say, targeting a president or a prime minister in a Western democracy.
Right, if we connect this to the bigger picture, you have to understand a concept in military strategy known as the decapitation doctrine.
Decapitation doctrine, okay.
The logic is that if you remove the head of the command structure, the enemy's ability to coordinate a unified response is completely paralyzed. But in Iran, the supreme leader is not just a political executive.
Right, it's a theocracy.
Exactly. Iran operates as a theocracy where the supreme leader holds absolute divine authority. And crucially, he serves as the sole arbitrator between Iran's dual military structure.
Wait, dual military structure.
Yeah, so you have the regular conventional army, known as the Artesh, and then you have the ideological branch, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, or IRGC.
So he's the only person who officially bridges those two massive, heavily armed camps.
Exactly. Without him, you don't just have a gap in an organizational chart. You have an immediate severe crisis of legitimacy. Removing the supreme leader instantly throws the entire governance of the state into a massive power vacuum.
So the idea was to just shock the whole system into freezing.
Right. The intelligence assumption behind a decapitation strike is often that this level of chaos will prevent a counterattack, shocking the adversary into submission before a broader war can even begin.
But looking at the timeline, that shock and awe paralysis absolutely did not happen.
No, it didn't.
I mean, a government in total turmoil, missing its highest leadership tier, still managed to launch an immediate, massive counterattack. How does a military functioning without its central nervous system pull off a coordinated retaliation?
Well, it's because of the very structure of the IRGC we just mentioned. The Revolutionary Guard is designed specifically to operate asymmetrically and somewhat autonomously.
Whoa, so they don't even need the top guy.
Right. They don't necessarily need a direct order from a supreme leader to execute pre-planned defense protocols. In the hours and days following Operation Epic Fury, Iran fired hundreds of ballistic missiles and launched thousands of drones.
Thousands?
Thousands, targeting Israel, U.S. military bases across the region, and various Gulf allies.
The drone aspect is where the asymmetry really shows itself, right? It's basically a math problem.
It is entirely a math problem. In asymmetric warfare, you are trying to overwhelm a technologically superior force with sheer volume.
Right.
You might have a drone that costs, say, $20,000 to manufacture. To shoot it down, the defending force has to fire a highly advanced interceptor missile that costs $2 million.
Wow, so the economics of defense are just totally upside down.
Exactly. When you launch thousands of those cheap drones simultaneously, you aren't just trying to blow up a base. You are trying to physically exhaust the enemy's radar systems and financially drain their defense budget.
But the retaliation didn't stay confined to the airspace over military bases. The dossier highlights that Iran immediately moved to close the Strait of Hormuz. For anyone just looking at a map, this is the narrow waterway connecting the Persian Gulf to the open ocean, right?
It is the definitive maritime choke point on the planet. I mean, the strait is only about 21 miles wide at its narrowest point.
That's tiny.
It is, and the actual shipping lanes that are deep enough for massive oil tankers are only 2 miles wide in either direction. And roughly a fifth of the world's entire oil supply flows through that tiny channel.
How do you actually close it, though? You can't exactly build a wall across the ocean.
You don't have to. You just need to introduce the credible threat of violence.
Okay, so just making it too risky.
Right. By deploying fast attack speedboats, anti-ship missiles on the coastline, and sea mines, you make the passage lethal. The moment commercial shipping companies believe a tanker might be sunk, maritime insurance premiums skyrocket to totally unaffordable levels.
Ah, so it becomes a financial blockade.
Exactly. Shipping conglomerates simply refuse to send their vessels into the Gulf. The waterway closes not because of a physical barricade, but because of logistical and financial terror.
So what does this all mean for the listener? I want to pull directly from the open brain data you provided on May 11th. When that strait functionally closed, Brent crude oil immediately spiked past $100 a barrel.
The shock was basically instantaneous.
Right. The shock to global energy and shipping markets was immediate. But your notes highlight that this didn't just impact gasoline, it directly spiked the prices of liquefied natural gas, or LNG, and agricultural fertilizers.
Yeah, that's a connection a lot of people miss.
Can you explain that mechanism? Because how does a blockade in the Middle East make fertilizer more expensive at a farm in the Midwest?
It's a fascinating cascading chain reaction. Modern agricultural fertilizer relies heavily on ammonia, and ammonia is produced using natural gas. Well, the Middle East is a massive exporter of LNG. When the Strait of Hormuz becomes impassable, the global supply of natural gas shrinks dramatically, causing the price of whatever gas is left on the market to just skyrocket.
So the chemical plants get hit first.
Right. Manufacturers suddenly have to pay astronomical rates to run those chemical plants. Those costs are passed directly to the farmer buying the fertilizer, who in turn has to raise the price of the crops they grow just to break even.
Which brings us right back to the grocery store aisle. It's like the Strait of Hormuz is the single toll booth on the only highway out of town.
That's a great way to look at it.
If someone sets a car on fire inside that toll booth, The entire supply chain backing up behind it grinds to a halt, and the person hundreds of miles away waiting for a delivery ends up paying the price.
And what's fascinating here is that you, the listener, documented this exact economic transmission belt in real time.
Hmm.
A geopolitical military decision made in a war room in February directly dictated the price of the bread on your table by May.
Let's transition to the broader costs outlined in this data, because beyond the grocery store, the raw ledger of this war is incredibly grim. We have to look squarely at the human and financial realities on the ground.
Yeah, the human toll is, without question, the most profound metric here. The sheer scale of the initial 900 strikes, combined with the massive Iranian missile and drone retaliation, has resulted in thousands of deaths.
And it's not just the casualties, it's the displacement, right?
Exactly. The destruction of infrastructure and the terror of ongoing bombardments have led to millions of people being displaced across the region. Entire communities have been uprooted, creating this massive humanitarian crisis that regional aid organizations are just completely struggling to manage.
And alongside that human tragedy is a financial burn rate that is almost difficult to comprehend. The May 11th Open Brain data estimates the direct cost of prosecuting this war at roughly $1 billion a day.
$1 billion every 24 hours.
It's staggering. The total estimate, when you factor in infrastructural damages and lost assets, is already sitting around $65 billion.
And this brings us to a highly sensitive domestic metric, your data captured. A war with this high of a daily price tag, both in human lives and economic treasure, requires immense political capital to sustain.
Right, you need the public on board.
But the U.S. public response is heavily fractured. As of your May capture, public opinion on the strikes was running at roughly 34% approval, compared to a massive 61% opposed.
I have to ask about the military and political logic here because this seems completely unsustainable.
It's a huge problem.
I mean, if you have a staggering 61% of your own public opposing the military action, and you are literally setting $1 billion on fire every single day while the global economy teeters on the brink of recession, how does a Democratic government maintain that campaign? At what point does the domestic pressure force the military to just pack it up and go home?
Well, you're identifying the exact strategic paradox that military planners are currently trapped in. The domestic and economic pressure to stop the conflict is overwhelming. The war is, by many traditional metrics, politically unsustainable. But here's the profound complication. Remember that decapitation doctrine we discussed earlier? The death of Supreme Leader Khamenei.
Right, the power vacuum, you took out the guy in charge?
Exactly. When you completely shatter the central authority of your adversary, who exactly do you negotiate the peace with?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the Iranian state is in absolute turmoil. Finding a cohesive, legitimate authority on the other side of the table, a single leader or council who actually has the unified power to order the IRGC, the Artesh, and all the various regional proxy groups to stand down is incredibly difficult.
Because they're all operating autonomously anyway.
Right. If local military commanders are acting autonomously, signing a peace treaty with a diplomat in Tehran might not actually stop the missiles from launching. You are essentially trying to negotiate a binding contract with a ghost.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because despite that power vacuum, there is currently a pause. The dossier notes that a ceasefire was actually mediated by Pakistan. It took hold on April 8th and was then extended indefinitely on April 21st. First of all, why Pakistan?
Well, Pakistan is uniquely positioned for this specific crisis. Geographically, they share a highly volatile border with Iran in the Balochistan region, so they have a vested national security interest in stopping the violence from spilling over.
That makes sense.
Furthermore, Pakistan is a nuclear-armed nation that maintains complex, multi-layered diplomatic channels with both Tehran and Washington. They have the diplomatic weight and the regional access to force both sides into a room.
But the reality on the ground is that the ceasefire is a deeply flawed concept, right? The data shows both sides have repeatedly violated it. And now, in late May 2026, negotiators have reached this tentative, unsigned deal to extend the truce for another 60 days and reopen nuclear talks. But when you look at the fine print, the foundational crises are completely unresolved.
That is the fragile reality of our present moment. I mean, the 60-day truce addresses the immediate large-scale exchange of munitions, but it leaves every systemic issue totally untouched.
So the strait is still an issue.
Yes. The Strait of Hormuz remains a massive, unresolved point of leverage, still severely restricting global trade. The crushing economic sanctions placed on Iran have not been relieved. Billions of dollars in Iranian assets remain frozen in foreign banks.
And what about the nuclear program itself?
Untouched. The very core issue that triggered this entire timeline, Iran's fast-advancing uranium enrichment program, has not been rolled back or dismantled in the slightest.
So if both sides are still sporadically exchanging fire in violation of the agreement, and absolutely none of the major geopolitical or economic issues have been solved, isn't this just a reloading period?
That's the fear.
Are we simply calling it a ceasefire because it's more palatable than admitting we're just pausing to catch our breath and stockpile weapons for round two?
This raises an important question, perhaps the most critical one for you as a listener, trying to navigate this massive influx of daily information. You are living through the messy, unresolved middle of a historical event.
It's happening right now.
Right. The diplomatic maneuvering happening right now, this fragile 60-day window, is an attempt to build a bridge over a chasm. But because there is no trust, no unified Iranian leadership, and no consensus on the nuclear issue, it's a bridge made entirely of paper. It could collapse under the weight of a single rogue drone strike tomorrow.
It is truly incredible to step back and look at the sheer velocity of the events we just walked through. We are only a few months removed from February 28th, 2026.
It feels like years, honestly.
It does. In that tiny window of time, we've seen Operation Epic Fury and the unprecedented saturation of 900 strikes. We've witnessed the death of Supreme Leader Khamenei, creating this massive power vacuum in Iranian governance. We've seen a massive asymmetric retaliation by autonomous military branches, the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, and a subsequent shock to the global economy that spiked the cost of energy and food in our own neighborhoods.
All in just a few months.
And now we sit in this highly volatile, unsigned, and repeatedly violated 60-day truce, costing $1 billion a day.
It is a staggering amount of history compressed into a single season. But I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over as you watch this continue to unfold in the news. The entire 80-year history of U.S.-Iran relations, from the 1953 coup all the way to the torn-up 2015 nuclear deal, has been defined by both sides, teaching each other they absolutely cannot be trusted.
Right, there's just decades of bad faith.
Exactly. Yeah. Now, with Iran's leadership decapitated and a deeply unpopular war paused by a paper-thin, violated ceasefire, how does anyone begin to negotiate a lasting peace when the very concept of trust between these two nations have been completely reduced to rubble?
That is a deeply sobering lens to view this through. The ripple effects here will long outlast the actual military campaign. Thank you so much for bringing your data and this incredible dossier to the table today. The perspective you provided is just invaluable.
Definitely.
Keep a close, critical eye on the news. Keep updating those open brain notes because this unprecedented chapter of history is writing itself right now. We'll be right here to help you unpack it